Good morning, everyone. I'm just seeing the attendees list expand right now, so we'll give it a minute to before we kick off. Thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I see we've got a fuller and fuller, well, it's not a waiting room now, we're now live. And welcome to the first of Cycling Scotland's Bikeability Scotland webinars. We have two of these planned, which are replacing what would have been our annual cycle training assistance conferences that we've held across the Central Belt and beyond in the past for CPD and exchange of ideas. I hope everyone's well. We're obviously in a rather strange period right now. The last 6 months have been quite extraordinary in so many ways. We've all faced many challenges in our personal and working lives, but I think the pandemic has also thrown up some real opportunities for cycling, and there's been a chance for us to demonstrate the impact of Bikeability Scotland cycle training too. Today's event is a chance for us, Cycling Scotland, along with our local authority coordinators and bikeability instructors, to share some of the challenges we've faced, but also some of the innovative solutions that have been developed in the last 6 months. And I'm delighted that I'm joined today by several of our key coordinators. We have Donna Brown from Murray, Josh Wood representing Dumfries and Galloway, and Philippa Barber from East Lothian. I've also got David Collins in the background. He, well, we can't see him on our screen right now, but is doing all the technical magic for us. So if anything technically doesn't magic happen, I'll be speaking to him later, but hopefully it's all going to be fine. And we're going to get an update from our panellists on what measures have been introduced to help continue delivery. Some from supporting childcare hubs, but also some as we return now with the schools back and external staff are finally getting into schools. Our speakers are all on message in terms of timings, and we've got some relatively brief but engaging presentations. I do understand that webinars are holding the attention span is challenging, so we'll do our best to keep you engaged and to keep it pertinent. For our audience members, thanks so much again for joining us. There's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end, but what we also have is there's a chat function. So if you've got any questions or you want to put while we go through, you should, if you wave your mouse over the screen, that option will come up and you'll be able to just type in a question as we go. If it's for a particular panelist, please do point them out when you're asking a question, and we'll try and take them as we go through. But my main hope is at the end we can move towards a panel discussion, and we'll bring as many of you onto the screen as you want. When we get to that point, I'll just ask you to raise your hand and we'll bring you on screen. Also, we have a couple of polls during the session too, just to keep us engaged, and they'll pop out at you just as the moment we think our attention's flagging. In fact, I'll get David to launch the first one right now to check it works. And at the end, we'll, as I say, we're going to move on to an exchange of ideas and challenges. I should have perhaps introduced myself at the start. That would have been the sensible thing for the chair to do. I'm Chris Johnson, Head of Education with Cycling Scotland. But I think really I'm here very much to learn from what our panellists have to say. And so time now to crack on, and I would like to introduce Donna Brown as our first speaker, and she'll give us her experiences from delivering in Murray with Outfit Murray.
Okay, hi everyone. Hi everyone, can everyone hear? Right.
Yes, we can, Donna.
You
it's
can
all going
hear.
great.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, Outfit Murray. Up here in sunny Murray, I'm Donna. I'm going to sort of talk about the opportunities and challenges of delivering in COVID. If you go on to the next slide, please. So, luckily, up in Murray here, we have a charity called Outfit Murray that I work for, that is local charity. So Bikeability has been contracted to us. So when the schools shut and we couldn't do Bikeability as had been planned for the summer term, we were in a unique position and had an opportunity to sort of take advantage of what had happened during COVID. So we are an outdoors organisation with our own bicycles. We have vehicles and equipment all here. So sort of ready to deliver Bikeability. We didn't need the kids to bring in their own bikes. We didn't really need anyone else. We could be independent. Our staff were available, and some staff were not able to be put on furlough. And very luckily for me, as the Bikeability coordinator, I had staff that were really willing and wanting to work and wanting to continue the biking activity over the COVID period in the hubs. So for our organisation, we didn't have any other outdoor activities going on. They'd all been stopped. And in the hubs, there weren't any other activities going on. So I felt like this was our opportunity for biking to really shine. It was our opportunity to present a really clear plan for biking in the hubs, and using our own, setting the agenda, almost normally having to consult and negotiate. In this case, we were able to sort of set our own limits onto what we were available and willing to do. So obviously during COVID, biking was free and it was outdoors and active, and it lends itself to being naturally socially distant. So we were able to sort of sell it from that point of view. And for me, as the Bikeability coordinator, this was an opportunity to sort of really focus on the biking and train and develop my own staff. We've got a lot of trainees that work for our organisation and people that are fairly new to Bikeability. We've only been coordinating the Bikeability for a couple of years. So it was our opportunity to try new things and again, work on the agenda that we wanted to work on. And an opportunity to meet staff from across our area and promote Bikeability. Obviously, the hub offered a unique opportunity. You got staff from multiple schools working in the hubs. And yeah, I felt like it was our opportunity to really get the Bikeability project and cycling up there and top of the agenda. Next slide, please. Obviously, there were challenges. There was sort of a bit of a lack of guidance and confusion about the rules at the beginning, I think, which everyone felt. So we used a teacher who is very involved with Bikeability and is actually CT trained, who was working in one of the hubs to go to the headquarters of education in order for us to roll out the programme. So it started with a trial in a couple of the hubs, and then it was rolled out to all 8 hubs when we'd received approval and everyone realised that it was going to be of huge benefit for the children in the hubs, and that it was going to work from a COVID and the hub regulations point of view. Obviously, as with all the hubs, we were working with different age groups, nursery to S2, and as the hubs developed, so from Easter through the summer, there were increasing numbers of some vulnerable children, SEN children, and we had a lot of non-cyclists in the hubs. So in all, over the period of the hub from Easter and over the summer, we managed to do 110 hub bike visits. We had probably upwards of 450 pupils involved with the hub biking activities. And, bonus, we managed to get 250 children through Bikeability 1 and 35 children through Bikeability 2. Bikeability 2, originally we were told that we weren't allowed to go off school sites. However, very luckily, and with a bit of persuasion in individual hubs, maybe where there was a CTA teacher or somebody who was really into the biking, we managed to get some of the Bikeability 2 in. As you can imagine, for sort of P6, 7, S2 children, just doing bike activities in the playground was going to be a little bit limited. And during the time of the hubs, we had over 100 pupils learned to cycle, including SEM pupils. So that was a pretty big commitment, working in the hubs to get all these children that couldn't cycle cycling. Next slide, please. So I think it was a real win for us in terms of bikeability up here in Moray. You know, people saw more directly how good the bikeability was. We were really able to get staff involved and show how good it was, and the kids really enjoyed themselves. We were able to get wider exposure of the project, so there weren't a lot of people delivering things locally, and we were certainly we were the first into the hubs, although other activities did follow. There was a lot of good Facebook and Twitter from the hubs, and obviously we were able to promote that we were actually doing something. We were actually doing some activity when our other activities had been cancelled. Some of the staff we met in the hubs are definitely people that I am now working with to do bikeability in term time. So we got some really good contacts from it. And amazingly, even in the time of COVID, we had some volunteers and volunteers and parents, teachers, and some of the active schools team came forward to help us with the biking and got quite involved. And again, that has led to good results now that we're back in term time. Obviously, we became a #1 topic of discussion in the education department during the time of the hub activity. I don't know how much impact that's had for the future. I sometimes feel a bit like we're back to square one now that term time has started. But we certainly got us some good publicity, and that is going to help for the future. Obviously, there were nursery kids involved with that, so we're hoping now to get the Reignite the Play on Pedals project in Moray, which had fallen a little bit flat. So obviously, showing the nursery hubs how good it can be, we've got some really good contacts, and it looks like that's going to move forward. And my staff, from a bikeability point of view, my staff had fantastic experience of flexible working with different ability groups, different age groups in different settings. So fantastic for my staff, who feel a lot more confident and have really enjoyed the hub way of working. And I think for Moray, it just shows me that sort of having an organisation like ours that sort of concentrates on bikeability, we're independent of the council with our own equipment, means that we are able to adapt to this type of situation. When schools can't deliver their bikeability or kids can't bring their bikes in, it seems like we've got the right model here. Next slide, please. So bikeability this term, almost not back to square one, back to March, but there's definitely interpretations of the rules. Each school, I find, is interpreting the rules differently. So as term started, I was having the same discussions I was having back in March about biking being outdoors, active and naturally socially distanced. We haven't been given specific guidance from Education and Social Care and Moray Council. They have told individual schools that they do their own thing. So I think for us up here in Moray, that is to our advantage, because it means there's no definitive rules. We can persuade each school that bikeability is good for them at this time. I found that coming back after the summer, I don't know whether it's due to COVID or the reaction to COVID, but there seems to be a lot more caution, and staff seem to be a lot more risk averse. And I've definitely found that staff, teachers and parents are not available this term to do bikeability for lots of different reasons. So I think schools are willing to do bikeability. The teacher that I used to help me get the bikeability going in the hubs during COVID was my first teacher to put bikeability into the programme for this term. And again, so once one school's trailblazed the bikeability, then other people seem to think it's okay. I have had a lot of schools cancel that had booked for this term. So my decision has really been to target small schools. Obviously, that's the way we've been working in the hubs, you know, using multiple age groups, maybe targeting the whole school. So that's my decision, really, to target small schools. If I can persuade the bigger schools, eventually sort of programming them in for sort of March, April time next year. So I think I've got about 12 out of our 46 primary schools booked for Bikeability 1 and 2 up till Christmas, and that's growing by the day. As more schools have begun their Bikeability programme, I guess word spreads, and I've had, you know, daily the calls are increasing. So it looks like it's going to be a successful year despite all the challenges. It's very much, I feel, my job is selling Bikeability very much to individual schools and them making the decision. So I would say at this time we're at an advantage because our program for Bikeability is a bottom-up program. So we're able to persuade individual schools and work in ways that work to get the project going. And so what have I learned? Well, I think Bikeability this term is be flexible and take opportunities. If you can see that they might be willing to do Bikeability too, that we do whatever it needs with risk assessments or talking to the school to see if we can get it done, and prepared for things to change at the last minute, which things do seem to be changing very much by the day. But I feel really positive, and I feel like this COVID has given us an opportunity here in Murray to go further with the project. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you so much, Donna. I think that has been an excellent introduction. And yeah, I think one of the big things we're going to learn is coming through on the questions already. I've got one from Manuela, which is saying that are the rules from local education departments differing with regards to external people going into schools? And our experience is very much that yes, they are, and I think that's going to come out in our panelists' discussions this morning. And I think one of the things Cycling Scotland, David and I would like to see is what support can we give everyone to help make the case locally that actually cycle training does really fit in with the call for increased outdoor education. And I think, Donna, what you've been able to demonstrate from that is even within a local authority, how there's the different interpretations from schools. So it's fantastic to hear what's worked and what you've learned from it. Before we move on then to our next speaker, Josh, I was going to ask David, do you want to pull up the results from the first poll? Can everyone, hopefully you can all see that. So are your schools actively looking to start delivery? I mean, wow, that's pretty telling. 50% yes, which is great. I mean, especially I think at this time, how we can best support that. So let's move on. I don't have any other questions coming up for Donna straight away, but I certainly will have some for you when we get to the panel at the end. So I'd like to thank you, Donna, very much.
Okay, no problem.
Back on at the end. And if it's all right now, I would like to invite Josh Wood up. Josh is currently with Cycling Scotland, but in the role as the coordinator for Dumfries and Galloway's Bikeability programme, but he's also done a lot of work supporting East Renfrewshire. So Josh, when you're ready, over to you.
Hopefully you can all hear me nice, loud and clear. Thank you all for the opportunity for talking to you this morning about my experiences. If you go on to the first slide for me there, please, Chris. So I'm actually going to be talking to you today about two local authorities, the one that I represent, Dumfries and Galloway, and also another coordinator, Keith Burgess, who covers the East Renfrewshire area. So talking to you about the hub activity and the level 2 activity that's planned for the next year. You can see straight from the off that the difference between the two authorities in terms of geographical size, very, very different challenges between the two. East Renfrewshire, reasonably small, not a huge number of primary schools. Dumfries and Galloway covers a vast area, and some of those areas are pretty challenging to get to and can be quite rural. Next slide there. Thanks, Chris. So I'll start by talking about the work that Keith Fergus has been doing in the cycling hubs in East Renfrewshire. Apologies that we've not got lots of lovely pictures of children on bikes like Donna had. We haven't got permission for any of the photographs that we have, so we'll just have to put nice pictures of the region up instead. Keith has very, very good relationships with the schools and with the local authority in East Renfrewshire, and they are a very, very positive support to bikeability in the region. So Keith was very quickly able to draw on those relationships that he has to approach childcare hubs. They had 6 childcare hubs in East Ren, and they identified working at all of them to deliver 32 level 1 bikeability sessions at those childcare hubs throughout the period of time they were open up to the end of summer. In order to do that, Keith had to be very flexible in terms of working with the local authority, particularly their health and safety coordinators, to adapt their sessions, making them kind of COVID friendly, and reassure them that actually the sessions could be run safely. It did mean the sessions looked slightly different in that obviously the childcare hubs cater to a wider age range of children than you would normally be delivering a bikeability session to. Typically for one year group, this was a much wider spread. It also meant that they changed their ratios of delivery slightly. So rather than your usual 1 to 15 level 1 ratio delivery, they took it down to 1 to 8, and actually only had one instructor working in the school at any one time, just to limit the numbers of external visitors that were visiting the school. Also, lots of stipulations around no bike sharing, obviously, helmet sharing, so equipment all had to be the individual child's, which does throw up challenges around making sure that it's as inclusive as possible, but it was the only option available to do the delivery at the time, and obviously the evolving situation. The main challenge that Keith found in the childcare hubs actually was social distancing. It doesn't come naturally to children. I know the situation is changing around how schools have gone back, but initially in the hubs, making sure that social distancing was happening was more of a challenge and something that needed reminding a lot more of. Level 2, bikeability within the region. You'll actually see here our Cycling Scotland level 2 instructor notes, which are almost finished. Chris was mentioning them earlier, that hopefully they'll be available very soon for everyone, and fingers crossed some of you have already seen them and had opportunity to give some feedback on them. Keith, again, building on those relationships that he has within East Renfrewshire, was able to approach all of the schools with the opportunity of delivery resuming as soon as schools got back. The local authority were very supportive of this. It's an outdoor activity. They've seen the benefits of it over the years through sustained bikeability delivery. And the way that Keith approached the schools was just an expression of interest to start with, to see whether schools felt that they had capacity to become involved in bikeability delivery. Lots of them did. A few understandably felt that staffing levels were more of a challenge this time round. But the way Keith offered the sessions was actually to be flexible about the days that they would take place over, rather than multiple 1 or 1.5 hour sessions over maybe 6 weeks. Sessions are being offered as a half-day blocks or full-day blocks. Again, limiting the time that external visitors are coming in and out of a school site, and giving a more intense delivery. It also means that if schools suddenly shut for whatever reason, that you're not halfway through a block of sessions, and then that sequence of bikeability sessions for those children doesn't get finished. Keith found that working with the health and safety team on a level 2 risk assessment and guidelines was really, really important for getting this off the ground in East Renfrewshire. That support and approval from the health and safety team on saying what was fine and what wasn't was crucial for Keith getting that foot in the door again into schools, and then seeing it as oh cool, we're fine to do this. And actually that's seen the health and safety team coming out with Keith to look at the sessions that are being delivered. So checking that, what they said they were going to do, they are doing, and that's proven to be very successful, and lots of work going ahead now. Just looking at the numbers here that Keith has planned so far, is that based on the response, they're hoping they'll be getting 400 to 500 P7 children through their Bikeability Level 2 this term. It is down from their usual 1,200 in P6, but what they're trying to do is catch up on the children that were in P6 that missed out because of the cancellations last year. So ideally there, what you're seeing is a flexible approach, and good relationships are key for not just during COVID, but actually for bikeability delivery generally. Next slide there, please, Chris. So moving across to, or south even, to Dumfries and Galloway, the region that I coordinate. Again, we were able to approach the childcare hubs in our region. There are 13 childcare hubs here, really covering that full geographical region. And we actually used the experiences of the other local authorities that were delivering in childcare hubs to use that as a selling point to our local authority, to say, this is what other places are doing. These are some examples of the risk assessments they've put in place. What do you think? And a very, very positive response from the local authority here to get us into the childcare hubs. Again, we were being very flexible around how that delivery looked, it being one instructor going into each hub, and that would be the only instructor that would then work with that hub, reducing the numbers down again, and making it a very, very games-focused level 1 delivery. So rather than it focusing on, trying to get through that level 1 to enable level 2 to take place, we knew we weren't going to be able to deliver level 2. So we just focused on making the sessions as fun and enjoyable as possible. It also meant that we could cater better to the wider age ranges of children that we were having come on the sessions, right from the younger end of the primary school to the P7s, and actually some secondary school children joining in as well. That ability to say what other local authorities were doing and that was working was really important in us getting things going in Dumfries and Galloway. It also enabled us to really build up some relationships as well, because a lot of the staff at the childcare hubs were based at other schools. Normally their day job wasn't at that hub, it was based at another school, and them getting to see Bikeability, how it works, has generated a lot of interest of people who now want to come on a CTA course and get things going at their school. Next slide, please, Chris. So how's that translated into Bikeability for this academic year in Dumfries and Galloway? As a local authority, this is one of the ones that's taking a more cautious approach to external visitors coming into school. So at the minute, we're looking at a review of things for the October half term, where hopefully after that schools and the local authority will be more keen to get some external activity delivery going. We're supporting schools that already have CTAs or CTs as part of their teaching staff, offering them support, offering them access to our fleet bikes if they need, to enable them to deliver as they need to. And also we're thinking about when schools are open to external delivery, what our offering is. So based on some of the lessons learned that Donna and that Keith Ferguson, East Renfrewshire have mentioned about how we adapt our delivery to suit the schools, is going to be really, really important once we hit the ground running. Next slide there, please, Chris. Great, thank you. That's everything from me. If anyone's got any questions, please, feel free to put them in the chat.
Great. Josh, that was excellent. Again, I think two quite contrasting experiences from Murray, which really does go back to this, I think, the situation we're in. We have probably 32 interpretations of national guidelines around the country, but within that, each individual school having their own particular policies. So yeah, I think this is really helpful, building up a picture of what is working to make the case. There's no questions come through now, but please remember, if you are following the webinar and you want to put a question, just use the chat function and we'll take them as they come through. Certainly, again, I'd like to bring Josh back up along with Donna at the end, and we'll have the panel discussion. In the meantime, I would like to introduce Philippa Barber, who's been working in East Lothian. But also Philippa's got a background in outdoor education as well. And so as well as hearing about the specific experiences to East Lothian, I believe also has at least some hints as to what else might be going wider to make the case to education, that just how important and how accessible outdoor education is going to be right now. So yeah, I'll hand across to Philippa. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. So as an outdoor learning instructor for East Lothian Council, we're in quite a fortunate position by the time the schools shut, because we'd already been making adjustments to our input in schools, and also in particular around the training that we were delivering for adults, be that teachers or parent volunteers. So when the schools shut in March, we were in a position to say, well, we have a product, we've already adjusted it, we already have the generic and the specific risk assessments made possible for the hubs. So Active Schools, who were actually coordinating the Easter holiday break, were able to just basically incorporate us into their programme. So it just seemed like a natural fit. And then we just continued on to the end of the summer holidays, just adjusting as we went on. The next slide, please, David. So this picture on this slide has been used so many times by East Lothian Council. It's amazing. It's currently on their website as part of the promotion about what was done during the schools being shut and over the summer holidays. So it's been a really good opportunity to showcase. So the hub activities, we were very fortunate because we had brilliant settings to work in. And I think really the only challenges we came across was the same as other people, is around that whole thing of equipment, about cleaning, not sharing. But with the smaller groups, it just seemed to fit quite well that you could work with them. And the younger ones definitely had more control over learning about the bike helmets, looking at how they can control that themselves, and also how they use the equipment that they're given generally. So I just feel that the smaller numbers meant that the relaxed sessions just upped the level of fun for them. And I think because there were so many restrictions in everything else they were doing, we were really fortunate that the kids just had an amazingly positive experience. And we're very fortunate with the weather as well. I think over the whole 5 months, we had a couple of days of rain, of which didn't really seem to affect anybody. So we have the next slide, please, David. So I think this is a good example. This was a session with P2 to P7s, and that was quite common. As with everyone else, we had nursery up to about S3, S4, huge number of new riders. And I think something that myself and my couple of colleagues that I worked with were taking away the importance of having someone modelling for the younger ones. The younger ones progressed so much more quickly, having the older ones there. And I think that's something that, with us all having been Play on Pedals and Bikeability instructors, we've been able to merge all of that training together into one product, which meant that, along with what the others have said, we're able to get many new riders through. I think we were probably well over 40 new riders, and that whole showcasing to staff who wouldn't normally see any cycling activities, especially not bikeability. So I'm going to move on to the last slide, which this was someone who basically didn't even want to get on a bike when she turned up to her session over the summer. It was absolutely fantastic. And I think overall it's been, as Donna mentioned, it's been an amazing opportunity to trial things. And I think the variety of ages and abilities has been a real challenge to us as instructors, but an opportunity for us to develop what we offer. And I think what Chris touched on, there is a big emphasis from Education Scotland and Scottish Government in what's called their Outdoor Learning Recovery Plan, that schools have to be delivering outdoors, and that includes that learning in the natural environment, physical activity. So we're in a position in East Lothian at the moment where we have one of our biggest primary schools, we've just started last week delivering. We've also got two of the smaller schools delivering bikeability. And I think because we had the evidence since the beginning of April that we can do this, we can adapt, as the guidance which has been touched on in the chat, that the guidance to schools is there's a lot of delegation to senior management teams within schools. So those are the people that I've been going to and saying, right, okay, so I can work with you and develop what you need. The guidance that's existing at the Scottish Government Education Scotland level is get your children outside, get them active. So we look at the guidance for East Lothian schools, and that currently we're restricted by two sets of guidance called visiting specialist guidance and visiting professionals. Visiting specialists are like your music teachers, your art therapists. We are now, as outdoor learning instructors, classed as them, so we can go into schools. So we limit our school involvement to one. At the moment, I'm trying to make sure that it's only one a week, and work with the school so that it's within all of their own, they have their own COVID-19 risk assessment. And so far, we've been able to, it's a huge amount of input with them just to support them through the process. But we've made sure that we fit in with East Lothian, which is reasonably generic guidance, and then we work with the senior management team in the schools to make sure that they feel comfortable. And so far, I'm pleased that we've got schools delivering, so that the schools who are still backing off and saying we don't want anyone from the outside coming in, I'm giving them evidence that in other schools we're happy that we're maintaining our, our delivery within the guidelines that exist. So I hope that helps. There was I noticed a chat came up then, but that is the end of my presentation, and thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. Excellent. Thank you so much again for the confirmation as to the current status in East Lothian. The question we've just had come in is Bikeability only delivered by outdoor learning staff?
No. Okay. I'm an outdoor learning instructor, and I'm also the Bikeability coordinator for East Lothian Council, and I support schools to deliver Bikeability. There are a number of schools who have staff who lead. There is other schools who rely on volunteers to lead, but they all generally have some input from me in terms of supporting with developing a plan or promotion or equipment or something. There are probably, out of our 34 primary schools, there are only 2 that go it alone, and they're completely self-sufficient. Does that answer your question? Who was that? Lorna.
I think, yes, it does. I think it is an interesting one. I mean, there's a huge number of different people and departments involved in Bikeability across the country, and I think the technical, the criteria, or as you've said, are you a technical specialist or a professional visitor? That's likely to be something we need to try and help unwind. When I know in other parts of the country it's been strange, even Sustrans or iBike coordinators have been treated differently in different authorities. And I think this is the biggest, it's one of the biggest challenges we're facing is different interpretations of the same guidelines, which is going to depend on local operating procedures. And that's everything from how a local authority is structured and its governance to also potentially some of the insurance that's purchased. So flexibility is going to be the key going forward. I'm going to come onto the panel in a minute. Just before we get there, I was going to give a couple updates from Cycling Scotland, largely about this flexibility that's required. We are in a very strange period right now where schools have gone back with fairly little notice, given the U-turn that came from government briefings before, when just before summer, when we were still preparing for a blended delivery, to where we are now, where schools have reopened en masse. One of the kind of acute challenges Cycling Scotland recognise is teaching staff. It wasn't as if there was a huge surplus of capacity before, but it's certainly even tighter now. Our usual requirement that school staff have to participate in training delivery, we are relaxing for the coming academic session. That means that if you are in a position where you can send external people, whether it's a professional third-party organisation, maybe a group like Outfit Mori, or volunteers into school, and that can happen, there's no requirement for the teaching staff to join in. Usually we really want that. What we don't want to do is parachute in a team to deliver cycle training and then parachute back out. If teaching staff are involved, that does generally lead to a more cycling friendly culture. Of course, your local authority may well have guidelines that specify someone from the school has to be part of it, and that's what should be followed first. Another thing we've been looking at, and I mean, we've trialled this over the last few years with, first of all, it was Midlothian, and then in the Western Isles, is delivering a kind of an intensive bikeability programme, where instead of having numerous sessions over several weeks, the training all happens in one go. And the key recommendation we've got from that is at least splitting it over 2 sessions is of huge benefit to the participants. But what it potentially does is it reduces the movement of instructors from one school to another. It also means if we do end up in a situation where local lockdowns occur, children who might be halfway through a block of training typically would have already had their training in that one intensive block. I think the key message we've got is all training can be delivered outdoors. There's no reason for any instructors to have to enter the school grounds. And okay, I think the experience of a childcare hub shows there's challenges in trying to maintain 2 meters distance from younger children. But experiences in learning from the hubs, certainly the ones that have been successful, those are the authorities that have been leading the way in getting training into schools afterwards. So, I mean, I think in terms of risk management, Bikeability is a very good offer for encouraging outdoor learning. And the final thing what we've learned is embracing new partnerships, however temporary they might be. I mean, we do have a number of teams and organisations that would otherwise support schools with different activities right now, where they have staff available and not able to run their own programme. I think now is a great time to try and utilise them. Of course, it may well be that well, ideally, when things settle down to something that resembles normal in the future, those partnerships, the teams you've been working with go back to delivering the main programmes. But right now, I think particularly with this acute, the staffing capacity issues, having people that can help is going to be so useful. The other thing, in terms of our current guidelines, we've stated these on our website. Obviously, we have to keep a close eye on what the Scottish Government announcements are each week. Thursdays is always an anxious, tummy-rumbling moment before we get to the midday announcement from the First Minister. I'm sure it's the same for you, but decides how late we go to bed that night in terms of working through what the changes are. Currently, what we're saying is if you are an instructor, contact your local authority coordinator for guidance. Local authorities' operating procedures should be followed. Children under the age of 12, which is most our Bikeability cohort, do not need to observe social distancing from each other, but instructors should aim to. The biggest challenge in what we've heard this morning from our panellists is often to do with the sharing and loaning of bikes and the cleaning regimes that's available. We will be making some funding available to coordinators to cover the relevant PPE about this. And of course, Scottish Government's facts, any opportunity to repeat that we'll take. So here it is again. We've had a question, how are different authorities dealing with the road part of Bikeability 2? And I think that's a great question we'll put to the panel just when we move on there. One quick advert I was going to make before we go to that panel discussion is, thanks especially to the input of Josh Wood, we have been trialling a family activity session over the last few months. 5 local authorities have participated in one-to-one household training. This has some loose resemblance to Bikeability in that both are based on the national standards for cycle training. And what we've been doing is sending an instructor to meet a family of parents and the children they're responsible for to run a cycling session so they can enjoy and gain something. This is very much part of our mitigation plan should we end up with local lockdowns or blended learning in the future. It's one way we want to maintain training, but the outcomes are going far beyond that. As you can imagine, getting the parent on a bike to understand the training that their children may have gone through Bikeability is going to be so advantageous in terms of encouraging them to continue to cycle and to make those everyday trips. Right, that's more than enough from me. I think what would be great is if we can move on to a panel discussion. And I'd just like to invite anyone that has got a question, if you just want to stick your hand up, what we can do is we can bring you onto the screen and put our questions to the panelists. While I'm waiting now for questions to come from the floor, I do have a couple myself, or one to kick off with. Donna, in Murray, you very much seem to have, there's been a case of seeking forgiveness rather than asking permission when schools have come to you to get training. And I think that's echoed by our other panelists in terms of if you've got a school who's willing to take on the responsibility for it, training seems to be much easier to get going. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Always seek forgiveness, not permission. Yeah, I think it's Murray, it sounds like we're quite different from the other local authorities. So I think the Central Education and Social Care haven't been willing to sort of say yes or no. And as I said before, I think that's to our advantage, because it means that you can work with individual schools. And obviously, if some of the hubs were more cautious, we could then say, well, the other hubs have been doing it, call them. And again, as we're doing Bikeability this term, I think you've got, obviously some school staff and teachers who are really believe in biking and think that it's really good and can see the advantages of it. So I tend to work with the people who want to work with. If they're overly cautious, then probably Bikeability is not for them. So yeah, I would say every school I go into probably has a slightly different interpretation. If they're new to Bikeability, then sometimes it's almost easier to say, how are we going to work this? Do you want to do it as a whole school? And how we engage that school, it's very much down to working with individual schools. From, as I said, I think in my presentation, we're definitely a bottom-up project rather than being given strategic guidance from the council. And I think at this time, I'm quite glad, because that feels like a bit of an advantage. Sorry, Chris, I can't hear that.
Hello, sorry, I'm trying to press technical issues with a mute button that's sticky. I'm back now. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that open to Philippa and Josh as well. I mean, does schools being given more autonomy help in terms of getting training in? Yep, Josh, you want to unmute? And
I think from a Dumfries and Galloway perspective, what I have seen is that there's schools who have the trained staff and are interpreting the guidance from government of trying to do as much outdoor activity as possible. We've seen guidance that has actually specifically mentioned cycling as being a positive activity to do. And that's led to some of the dialogues I've had with schools that have those trained staff already in place to be able to go and do their delivery. We've not yet had any approaches here for external staff like myself to go into the schools to help, but certainly the schools that are already on board with Bikeability seem very keen to keep going with that.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, Philippa.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the schools that were already planning on delivering, I think mainly the ones that cancelled last term, we had to cancel last term, I think they seem to have brought in more quickly to conversations. And I don't believe we have any schools, and we have one actually, who are actually putting some staff through a CTA course at the moment. That's a school who haven't delivered for about 5 years. So that's unusual though. But I think I'd also mention about sort of Claire's question around on-road training. I think there is a particular opportunity around on-road training because you're not taking instructors into the school. And so that's where I've had 2 conversations this week already about just bring your kids out with a teacher and we will be there waiting. And that we think that might work. But our particular challenge in East Lothian is we rely quite heavily on community learning and development and community wardens to support the on-road training. And at the moment we're not sure whether we can use them, whether they happen to be standing at the end of the road, for example. We don't know where, yeah. So we're still thinking about that one.
Excellent. Thanks, Philippa. I'd just like to welcome, we have Alison Mackey from CLACS with us as well. So David, do you want to bring Alison forward? I think it'd be great to get her input as well. Alison, hopefully you're receiving an invite to click a button just now. Let's see how this goes.
Oh.
Hello, Alison. Sure, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it was a bit of a question, but actually it got a wee bit answered there. Was obviously the Education Scotland PE guidance that came out quite specifically said that one of the suggested activities that should be going ahead for PE is cycling, and I just wondered if anybody had used that as an argument to, you know, to get more cycling in. And the other one was a bit more of a practical question. Is the biggest problem we're having at the moment is our playgrounds are obviously very full with all outdoor learning going on, with all these classes that are going outside. So, you know, we do have a full programme. I've just come away from a school this morning out in the playground, but there's staggered breaks, there's PEs outside, their start and finish times are causing problems, you know, with full day bikeability level 1, for example. Has anybody found out some creative ways of, you know, other ways to deliver level 1 on the school grounds, or are they having the same problems with us about trying to work out and work around all these different outdoor classes now?
Maybe shall I answer? So yeah, I think we're very lucky in Moray. Most of the schools have quite good areas, but as you say, you're seeing different break times, staggered break times. At one school we're working in at the moment, we're working with a class of, I think it's 34 kids on different afternoons, and again you've got all the different classes coming out to do outdoor learning. So yeah, we have found space a little bit of an issue, and again sometimes maybe the rest of the school doesn't know that bikeability is going on. So again, sort of quite often being flexible and adaptable, thinking, right, is there, you know, can we use the grass school field? So again, being adaptable or trying to communicate with the school. Again, we've had I was doing bikeability last Wednesday, and there was like a big outdoor learning group just walked right through the middle of my cyclist. So I think it is something that, you know, maybe we need to discuss with the school and explain that we do need the space in the area, but it's something that they have to factor in when they're planning bikeability for sure.
I could say, Alison, this is something, I'll be honest, I never actually considered, but of course level 1 is going to be more challenging. Even without the other outdoor learning happening, we've got the, as you say, but the staggered break time, the trying to maintain bubbles. Actually, David, I wonder, do you want to run the second poll right now, which was about what are the key barriers, if you are facing, to getting schools happening? And as you can see, we have pre-populated some numbers, so multiple choice, but potentially there's others which we don't have in there. And I think, Alison, what you just put forward there is something we need to be aware of. So yeah, we'll leave that poll up for a few minutes, and if you want to have a vote. If there is, if there's a particular barrier you're facing which isn't on there, please put it into the chat and we can pick that up as well. Alison, did we get say the second part of your question answered as well? Oh, well, the other part was using PE. Is anyone using it? And I know I've got Sheila from Fife has said that they're looking at the PE guidance. Philippa,
Yeah,
Josh?
Can I just say that we were, before the guidance changed before the summer, when obviously we were looking at a blended learning model before all the children came back, you know, you were going to have smaller numbers in classes, etc. We have full-time primary PE teachers in Clackmannanshire, and we had actually inquired about putting them through their CTA training. We were actually going to embed cycle training into our schools, and our PE teachers were going to lead it, and it was a really exciting opportunity for us, and I think I shared that with you guys at the time. But unfortunately, from our perspective, obviously all the children were allowed back to school at the same time, and that model wasn't possible because our PE teachers, you know, have a very full timetables throughout a day. But you know, our schools are still engaging with us, and we're playing catch up with all the cancelled sessions, and you know, we've got a very full timetable. But you know, there was a real opportunity for us, and it is really exciting that they have listed cycling as, you know, something that should be done in PE. Logistically, how that happens in primary schools with the number of bikes and things that you need, you know, it's actually a bit pie in the sky, to be honest. But it is a good talking point to get it into schools, you know, because it is there in the Education Scotland guidelines around PE. Cycling should take place, so there needs, you know, there's at least a foot in the door to have that conversation with schools. You know, you're not delivering PE, but you're offering the activity that's listed as outdoor PE. So it's a good maybe open door to get into have a conversation with schools or education, you know, kind of senior management.
Thanks, Alison. David, I just wondered, do we have the results of that poll that we can put up yet? Well, we'll see when it comes. Josh, sorry, on you go.
Yeah, certainly something that I'm going to be and have been using a lot of with in terms of trying to sell Bikeability for this new academic term or year. The legitimacy of that PE offering is a really good one, and also actually that idea that everyone has seen of how many more people have been on bikes as a result of COVID. And really legitimising actually cycling as an activity has been a really, really useful thing in opening doors and conversations, and people who might otherwise have previously been a barrier or not necessarily someone who would see the benefit of cycling, suddenly seeing all of these people out on bikes has made that conversation much easier to have as well.
Thanks, Josh. I have just had we've got another question through. Does Bikeability have representatives who are lobbying higher up for Bikeability to take place? Just before I came onto this webinar, I was speaking to Transport Scotland, who directly fund Cycling Scotland to help manage and coordinate the Bikeability programme. And I was making them aware of the situation we're currently in. I mean, I'll be following up with Suzanne Hargreaves at Education Scotland as well, but this is, I think, now the time. I mean, I think intergovernment departments, we are raising the issues with them. I mean, I think there's some mitigation in place, but what we really hope is that we can get some movement and confidence among local authorities to actually look at making Bikeability an easier offer. And if within your own local authority you're finding that a difficult one to make, we're certainly happy to get involved and speak to or try and make the case to heads of education to try and show that, you know, we can bring innovative solutions and mitigation to respond to the risk assessments to make that happen. But yeah, at a situation right now where we're looking at 1/3 of the country has a barrier to letting anyone external in. That's a huge barrier to a programme that relies on a smaller ratio. And David, I think, has the poll results now, so we'll pop them up. Yeah, so we can, I mean, that's reflected at 62%. It's a local authority restriction. I don't think we've got anyone from Glasgow on the line with us today, but I had met with Balik Shah, the coordinator, previously, and I think they were very much hoping that, you know, the period up to the long weekend was going to be the bit of a trial and the test, and that was being looked at in some areas as the first milestone to see what could change. Would that allow some greater flexibility? I don't know how that's going to play out. Obviously, we've got the wider situation in Scotland doesn't look particularly optimistic right now, but I think the experience of children being back has been very warmly received by staff. So hopefully that will lead to something of a thaw and we can show the experiences. But please get in touch if you've got a particular authority and a challenge. Let's see what we can do to help. Oh, and another question. Does anyone know what the situation is in the Highlands? And I do believe I have our local coordinator, Emma, available. So I don't know if we can get Emma. Are you willing for us to bring you up onto the panel to answer? Hopefully David can make that happen. Welcome, Emma. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this. Can you give us a quick update on how things are across Highland?
Hello.
Hello.
So Highland is at the moment. Yeah, sorry, I'm in the car. I'm in Fort William. So Highland is not accepting visitors to any school of any kind. They're really struggling with their even getting in PE staff and music staff and stuff. So we're very much kind of, I've spoken to some of the education team and they're all for bikeability. They're excited to get us in when that happens. We'll probably be around about the same time as the Arts of Schools coordinators, who are only just starting to come back off furlough. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll probably be after October, I think now. But yeah, we've been looking at other plans. So we've got a team at Velocity who have been started offering some of the family ECS sessions. Our iBike officer has been working with me to kind of try and get something on the go for some looked after children and some of the homeschool children, but there's not very much happening. And I've had a lot of CTAs who are just keen to get going, but we are just waiting at the moment. So yeah, and that's across the whole of the Highlands. There's the iBike officer was invited into some schools, but that was stopped basically by the education team. So schools are keen, they're ready to crack on, but it's the bigger guys, the big bosses that are saying no at the moment. So that's where we're at. Yeah. Great fun.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, and especially thanks for joining us on the move. I guess one thing we need to be aware of, I mean, that really does indicate that as well, we shouldn't necessarily feel discriminated against either way. It's not just Bikeability Scotland, which is struggling to get moving in some authorities. We have to be aware of the bigger picture. And, you know, we can continue to make the case, and I think a recent communication from the Scottish Advisory Panel of Outdoor Education has kind of helped move that along in some areas. So we'll see how it goes. Another thing we have to be considering is if the situation over the winter doesn't go great. Obviously, schools have all these blended learning plans that they developed before the summer holidays, and I think unfortunately some of those may get implemented. In that case, Cycling Scotland, we will be looking at what we could offer potentially in more of a community rather than a school setting. We're just very aware that at the minute you move anything out of a school setting, that the equitable and inclusive offer is diminished. And if we see bikeability, I mean, I truly believe it develops life skills. It's not just believe that, the evaluation shows that. It's a huge dose of road safety education that happens. We've seen a rapid rise in the number of people who have returned or been cycling more through the lockdown period. So I think it's essential we have to try and support them. And although there's a very encouraging news about increased funding for cycling infrastructure, as you'll probably be, I stay in one of the Ayrshires, and as I imagine locally as well, you'll have seen the speed to implement spaces for people infrastructure is slow. And until there is a super coherent network of cycling infrastructure across the country, bikeability and national standard cycle training is more essential than ever. We need to support people with the skills and knowledge to make those trips. And not just the skills and knowledge, it's very much the confidence, which is what we're all delivering with bikeability. So it has to happen in some shape or form. We're just, the reason it happens in schools with a captive audience of children at a particular age range is founded in logic, and we don't want to deviate too much from that to get through this, but we are willing to, as I say, to make the concessions to introduce the flexibility. So let's see, if we can't win the argument by the October break with most of these authorities, we will start looking at options B, and option C will be the rollout of ECS family opportunities. Just trying to see, do we have any other questions coming through? Donna, you've got a question for us. I'll need to unmute you.
Okay. I was going to ask, those things are great, but this isn't just a COVID problem, and I don't know if other local authorities have this problem, but you know, one of our barriers for bikeability is the fact that we have so many children that can't cycle bicycles. So before lockdown, we went into one school in our main town in Elgin, and we had 20 out of 60 children that couldn't cycle in P4. And that's not that was pretty surprising for the, that's a bikeability school and everything. But so I've gone into some schools who haven't done bikeability before and will have half the P5, 6, 7s that can't cycle. And, for people that are teachers or parents, CTAs, going into a school to do bikeability and discovering even 4 or 5 kids that can't cycle, I think this is something that we really need to address, because obviously the Bikeability Project doesn't fund that. And luckily I work at an organisation where we can acquire other funds. So we've put a lot of funding towards a Learn to Cycle programme, and even in a sort of, because obviously not all schools are doing bikeability. We've been offering that at a school level, but also at weekends offering, Learn to Cycle sessions. But it's just a problem that I'm finding more and more as I go into schools. And during the hub time, I reckon it was about 25% of the kids when we were in the hubs that couldn't cycle. Obviously, a lot of them were children of key workers, and increasingly as the hub thing went on, were vulnerable and disadvantaged. But I would say we are probably looking at, until we establish a cycling culture, we are looking at 25% of kids that can't cycle. And they, if they can't cycle, we can't include them in bikeability. If they're P7 and they can't cycle, they're not going to get to bikeability too, are they?
Yeah, thanks, Donna. I mean, it's an issue, and one, to be fair, Cycling Scotland have been observing an increasing challenge at that for a long time. Certainly, I think one of my proudest moments was being involved in the initiation of the Play on Pedals programme that kicked off in Glasgow in 2014. And I mean, it was over 90% of children have a funded or take up the funded space within the nursery setting. And the Play on Pedals programme is meant to ensure they can ride a pedal bike before starting school. Now, obviously that does leave a gap between a 4-year-old and an 11-year-old, that we haven't quite seen the impact of the first cohort going through it. But there is a longitudinal study that was being developed with Glasgow Centre of Population Health. And we do expect to start seeing the impact of that coming through. I think it does leave us a scenario where across the country there's some sticky plasters need put on the gap in the middle. But the long-term strategic approach, I think, is very much we need to enable as many children as possible to benefit from programmes like Play on Pedals at a younger age, because, I mean, as we say, age 11 is when you're meant to have the cognitive skills and ability to judge speed, distance, to be on the road safely. But all that gap before, I mean, if you've not learned to ride a bike until that age, you've missed out on huge other opportunities. So, yeah, I think there are the usual, as well as COVID, there are a number of legacy issues we have to try and get. I mean, level 2 cycle training last year was fantastic. I mean, the 2018-19 year, we saw 47%, the biggest rise ever in the number of pupils undertaking level 2 training. The fact we're still below 50% though shows how much work there is to be done. And until we can get schools to offer that training, it's very difficult for the kids at those schools to be able to undertake it. So we will continue to push that and promote it as much as possible. One thing I did want to pick on a more positive note though is the experience of the childcare hubs, which has been a mixed age, really does show what potentially could happen pre-level 2 to a wider audience. And whether those of you who've been involved in the childcare hubs could see that working for our smaller, but also very much the rural schools, where instead of just a handful of older children participating, is that a way forward to actually get the whole school or larger groups? Philippa?
Yeah, well, we already have a couple of schools who do a complete nursery to P7 because they're generally the very small rural schools. And I think I have had conversations with other bigger schools where I think bikeability is enough for their brains to handle. I think talking to them about a whole, something for every year group is probably too much, and we wouldn't have capacity either. But I think at the school that we're working with at the moment, with 4 and 5 classes per year group, we get around about 10% of children who can't ride at P5, and that's having an impact. So the deputy at that school, we have had a conversation about, can we push something further down the school? But we're talking it's potentially going to be 2 years before we get to a point where that's feasible.
muted. Thank you very much, Philippa. I'm just noticing the time. I think we'll need to start looking towards wrapping up. I just pulled up on the screen. Hopefully, you can see it was the usual email address. If you want to get in touch with any specific question, we can put that to the panelists as well and get back. I mean, I hope you found this morning a useful kind of learning to see why there's not a uniform solution to make bikeability happen right now, but also some of the innovative and successful schemes which are operating, which I think really does make the case. I mean, if a school in one authority can do it, why can't the one that might be in the next town not, by following the same guidance? So I think we are building up a really good bank of evidence, and hopefully we're going to see momentum on our side. Just as a bit of an advert, we are also planning on having the second webinar, hopefully I would say in October, which will be based on the new resources and the changes that have been implemented since the national standards were adopted the end of last year. I understand that this year is a difficult time to introduce these new resources because there's already so much flux and change. So it will be a flexible timeline as to when those are adopted, but local authorities that wish to use them will be putting the support measures in place so that as of January, those resources will be out. We've had the final round of consultation, so the final tweaks are now in with the design team. We'll put them back round and they will go to the governance body, the Bikeability Scotland Delivery Group, for formal sign-off, and that'll be followed by a period of CPD. So that's what our next webinar will focus on. In the meantime, no, I think we're all very conscious the pressing issue, as you're identifying, is we have half of our schools wish to get active and get delivering, but at the same time, the biggest barrier 60% of us are responding to is getting around local authority guidelines. And Cycling Scotland is here, and we do have links. Whether or not we are hugely influential by ourselves we'll find out, but we do also have the support of Transport Scotland to help us make that case. So yeah, let's see how we can support you. I'd like to thank Philippa, Josh and Donna very much for sharing your experiences and staying on for the panel. Also to Emma and Alison for letting us put you on the spot and bringing you on screen. But most importantly to everyone else who's signed up and given the time for this. The session is being recorded, so Cycling Scotland will make that available. So if you've got colleagues who you think would benefit from listening to that experience, it will come up on our website hopefully later this week. But with that in mind, thank you very much again to everyone that's joined us, and good luck. I think I can't stress enough, I mean, I absolutely believe in national standard cycle training and those opportunities. We've seen that coming out, and at a time where we've seen such a growth in the numbers of people cycling, such a long queue outside our local bike shop to get something fixed, we have to just ensure that people still have access. So thank you very much. Cheers, folks.
Thank you.